sometimes there's the nice to haves and there's like the pains. And I thought the next company I started, I wanted to, really solve a pain that people had. And when I looked at, how I was managing rental properties, I moved, I rented. I had a lot of friends of mine who were renters, and would call me because they knew I was a landlord, and when they had issues with their landlord over security deposit. And so I really thought, hey, I've taken a lot of photos of the property to ensure that I know how it changed over time. My residents sometimes were taking their own photos, but there was a disconnect there, and lots of the properties were remote. I actually had a Naval Academy classmate of mine that was managing or helping me manage one of my properties in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and he would take a ton of photos and send them to me. So there's all this documentation that was being done, and I kind of thought about, well, how could there be efficiencies with this documentation? How could we share this easier? And then I looked at the deposit process and like where most of the arguments were, and most of them could be settled with photos. And at the time, mobile apps were taking off when it comes to people taking photos. Facebook, Instagrams, and camera technology was really, really getting good. And I thought, hey, I think this is a problem that mobile technology could be utilized to solve. And this problem was disputes over security deposits. Now, the underlying theme of how do you solve the disputes over security deposits is proper documentation and show how properties changed over time, because that's actually would settle the disputes. And so that's kind of how I landed on this specific problem. And then decided to go back. Well, initial idea, really wanted to work through this problem and still had the GI Bill left. And I decided to go back to Tulane and get an MBA full time. And I figured, hey, I just work on this idea and maybe find somebody to join me and start the company. And I think this is part of the lesson of like knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses. I knew I'm a vision guy, I'm a builder, but there's a lot of other things that I'm not interested in doing, or I don't have a strong skill set to do. And that's why, having a co-founder or finding somebody that matches your skill set is important. And it just so happened, orientation week at Tulane, I was kind of pitching, meeting all my new classmates. I was pitching this idea for RentCheck, and asking people, hey, did you lose your deposit when you just moved here? A lot of people had moved from New York, San Francisco, other places. And I just so happened to bump into Lydia, who's now my co-founder. And she was in the process of suing her landlord over a security deposit. And because she was doing a JD MBA. And because of that, she's decided to represent herself, and she had taken a bunch of photos, and she used those photos to sue her landlord and win back the deposit plus some additional money. And so we were both passionate, just was luck that we were both passionate about the same problem, but from different perspectives. Her more from the resident perspective, how do you get back what you're deserved? And then me more from the property manager's perspective of, how can you run your business and be a good landlord, a good property manager, and have the data that you need to make smart decisions. And so we kind of worked on the idea through the first year of the MBA program. And I, didn't attended classes the second semester, but really started coding and building the app, or the initial version. But kind of leading up to that, I sent out on like Facebook group, military Facebook group, I essentially sent out a survey. Started with a survey of like, hey, how many of you take photos when you move in? How many of you take photos when you move out? Do you share those with your landlord? And I kind of like targeted both renters to see how many renters were taking photos, how many property managers were taking photos, and how like lots of people were taking photos, but nobody was sharing them with each other. It was like the renter was taking photos to protect themselves. The property manager was taking photos to like run their business and make decisions. And I was like, well, I think I need to build a tool to let both parties come together and accomplish the same thing, that both parties would like to achieve. And so that's kind of, why I decided, hey, I think there's enough compelling reason to start building this app, and I have the skill set to build the app. So I built the initial version of the app in the second semester, of the MBA program, and just kind of put it out there on a landing page. And we started, messaging people in Facebook groups, landlord Facebook groups, etc. And people just started signing up. They actually couldn't really complete the inspections because the app was so bad at the time. But it showed, all I wanted to do was show that there was a demand for a tool that would allow, the property managers, or show that property managers actually wanted to have the tenants perform inspections. Than what they would traditionally do in the past is actually property management companies or property managers would go themselves or pay an employee to travel to the property and do an inspection. And this was a new concept of, hey, why would you travel when you could, let the resident do this and give you the data that you need to make a decision? And so that was really the top theme. And, we kind of had several hundred people, 1,000 people sign up pretty quickly just through these free channels. And, me and my business partner, Lydia, my co-founder, and that summer, were like, hey, I think this might be something that like we really want to turn into a company. Let's kind of do what the traditional story looks like in the movies. Like, let's like book a fly to Silicon Valley and let's like go try to meet people and pitch them. And we put together a deck and booked a flight to San Francisco that summer. And we just hit up our network. And this was where like having a strong network of people that can make introductions. We got a bunch of meetings with people who would invest in companies. We went out there and just met with them. And the feedback pretty much was, hey, it seems like you have something here that, would be investable. And so, we started at that point to really take it serious and say, hey, let's focus the second year of the MBA program on actually building out this app. And when we graduate, we want to start this company. And so we worked on it through the rest of that. And then the second semester, we essentially, joined into every single pitch competition that there was.
Marco, a quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
When you flew out there to Silicon Valley, how many subscribers did you have for the existing app at that point?
Yeah, so at that time we probably had, we had, and this was the interesting thing is we had about 1,000, maybe like 1,000 had signed up in like 3 months, and this was all just organic, just like in Facebook groups, and it was half were property managers and half were renters, right? And they were both signing up on their own to use the same tool. And that actually was how we discovered that, hey, we can actually like bring this, like let them invite each other to join each other, because they're both coming to essentially do the same thing, just from different perspectives. And that's what really kind of like built the actual story of like, hey, we can actually get property managers to distribute our product to the renters, and the renters will actually want to do the work for the property managers because they have their own incentives, right? And so that was actually the really that lesson that we learned, and that data was actually the nugget of what turned into the story for us to be able to raise capital from investors and actually figure out the real product we needed to build. And that's why I always tell people, like, a lot of people are scared. If they have an idea, they're scared to put it out there because they think somebody's going to steal it. Or it's like, it's too early. And I'm always like, get it out there. If somebody can steal it from like a landing page or a shitty version of it, and then execute on your idea, like you probably were going to lose anyways. So it's better to get it out there, get feedback, let people use it, because you actually learn a lot more. The initial idea is like a concept, but like the actual real usage and how it actually will grow and turn into something more powerful is only by putting it in the hands of the end users. And so that's what we did. And literally, like, property managers would invite renters to do an inspection, and they could, like, maybe 3% could actually complete the inspection because like the experience was so bad. But that wasn't what we were trying to prove at that point. We were trying to prove that property managers wanted to sign up and they wanted to invite the renters to do the inspections instead of them having to spend time driving to the property, going through and taking a bunch of photos, right? And that's kind of the nugget to then make sure or validate this bigger idea of, hey, we can completely change the way property management companies in the US operate. They had always paid employees to go do these inspections, or they didn't do any inspections at all, or they've left a piece of paper and it was like no images were taken, and there was some software that had been built in the past, but it was all built solely for the property manager. And we were trying to show that, like, hey, that's like an old, outdated version of what it is. There's a new version that includes both parties that then builds into a much bigger product. And so that's what we did, and we ended up successfully. We graduated May of 2019, and all in that same month we closed an angel round of $1 million, graduated, and we hired our first employee, who was Lucy, who's now she's our head of product. And at the time, it was kind of all luck that we found her. She was at another prop tech company down here that they recently, raised 40 million in their Series C. We just had met her and she was their VP of product. We just met her, and through a coincidence, and I just let her know, and she just was ready to jump to something new. And so, we kind of graduated and kind of hit the streets running, and then we went to, and really the product still wasn't anywhere what it needed to be. We still just had the initial idea, and I knew that I needed a product person to help me figure out, okay, how do we build the real product that we can actually scale and grow, and will do the things that people want. And then we applied to Techstars. Techstars is an accelerator program that's pretty difficult to get into. Techstars and Y Combinator are probably the top two technology accelerator programs. And so we applied and got accepted to the Techstars in Atlanta. And so we decided, my wife agreed to let me go for 3 months. So I essentially moved to Atlanta for 3 months. My wife with two kids were at home suffering. I flew back almost every other weekend, but other than that, pretty much worked, 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. every day for 3 months, and really focused on building out the first version of our product, in which we launched essentially October of 2019. And looking back, if I didn't take that big of a risk and that challenge, our product would have been nowhere ready for what was about to come, which was COVID. And so we happened to really spend the time, build that product and launch it October, November of 2019, and just started figuring out that we were going to sell to property management companies. They would pay for our software and distribute it to the renters. And little did we know, COVID hit, 2 months later, and we essentially, or a couple months later, we essentially got the best free marketing we could have possibly asked for as a company, where property managers could no longer even go and enter the properties. So they were looking for a tool, and we were the only people out there that had a tool that they could accomplish that with. And so we went from end of 2019, we had maybe 2,000 properties, 2,000 rental units on our platform. And fast forward to the end of 2020, we had over 150,000 rental units on our platform. And that was essentially all organic. Didn't spend any money on marketing. We focused all on engineering. The team grew from 4 to 6 during that time, and 5 of us were engineers, product engineers, and my co-founder was the only one who was essentially doing all the sales by herself. As people would sign up, she would convert them, and so we really built the product and focused on building the product right. And then, just earlier this year, we used that momentum to show that, hey, we built a good product, we're getting distribution, we're selling to customers, they really like our product. To then now we just closed, this isn't public yet, but it will be out soon. We just closed earlier this year, a seed round of funding of 2.6 million, which is essentially going to fuel us to hire more employees and really build out a sales growth team to try to grow the product even faster. And there's a bunch of new functionality and kind of to get to the vision we want to get to, a lot more things we want to build as a company to accomplish our mission, which is eliminating security deposit disputes and making the whole rental process fair and transparent.